Welcome back. We're on The Boss with Mr. Jamal Akbar Khan, the CEO of Arpatech. Jamal, very interesting conversation because I get to learn a lot, and this time again I've learned something new from you. Tell me, Arpatech has been now running in Pakistan for now 5 years. How do you see the growth of the company? What do you look at in the future? How do you feel that it'll go from here?
Right, so the growth sort of trajectory that we have is we expect to grow about 100% this year, and I think subsequent years as well we'll grow 100% year over year. We want to grow fast, but we want to grow right. And there's almost this fine balance that you have to strike. You cannot sort of overbuild a capacity and then sort of not have the business drivers to drive that capacity. At the same time, you don't want to have under capacity. So we've got to figure that sort of magic mix out, and I think we will probably grow this year about 100% in subsequent years as well. So that's a positive end of in terms of where we're going as a business.
The growth part sort of goes along, but tell me, have you been able to find people every year as the company grows, with the kind of people that you were looking for?
Now, unfortunately, that's our biggest challenge now. Our number one challenge is human resources, and I'll be honest with you, we're now looking at the options of a second country to build certain capacities out of, whether it's Malaysia or it's China. We are looking at the potential where we might be building certain development centers there as well, for a whole bunch of reasons, not just human resource reasons as well. But we haven't reached that point where it's becoming impossible to find the resources. There are certain inflationary pressures as well. I've got to get that point across as well. You cannot sustain a business over the long term if you have increments in one of your larger expenses, which is payroll, and increasing those payrolls by 10-20% annually. It's not a sustainable model, and unfortunately the inflationary pressures that we're facing from a wage perspective, and whether it's being driven by telecom or the banking sector, is irrelevant. And the reason why I say that is when you go and structure a deal with any organization outside of the country, you're doing so on the basis of certain financial metrics. And there you identify your margins and you say, okay, I'm going to lock this price in for you. All of a sudden, we're getting inflationary pressures year on year. Folks are changing jobs and stuff, and they're saying, we need the 10, 20, 30% increments, and we are getting them 10, 20, 30. But that eats into the company's margin, and our margins usually get reinvested in the business in terms of building capacity and things of that sort. So that's an impediment in terms of growing our business effectively.
Pakistani clientele, are you focusing on the Pakistani market more now since the last 5 years, or has it always been to be working around Pakistan as one of your offices in the country?
No, we did not focus on Pakistan. At one point we tried to, and then we had to deal with the companies and the issues locally. Our culture, the way I've been brought up, is very different. I can work with folks who work on the basis of output and things. There's so many tangential elements within the Pakistani market, which is outside of the scope of me being successful. So I'm intuitively structured in such a fashion that I can work more effectively with markets that are a little bit more developed. But there have been instances where local entities have asked us to assist them and help them, because we have a really strong skill set in particular areas, and we've certainly helped them out. That's never been an issue.
Has the Pakistan market been able to sort of give you that kind of output? That yes, the company that you're working for, you're sort of running, is also a certain requirement in our own country, and it is a very, very important factor.
Yeah, I think there is an element. For example, we are very strong in IT security, and I think that's a strong element. And we cater to the IT security needs for large entities around the world. That is clearly an area that can be sort of driven here in the local market, but we've not done strong enough service in projecting or providing those services here or marketing those services. So I cannot necessarily blame or sort of bring that sort of extrapolation that the local market, whether it gave us the chance or is providing us the chance, we've never marketed ourselves effectively. So, but I think if we did, we certainly would be successful. But we have enough, on the front end of the business coming from European and North American partners that we can certainly build out our capacity on those growth requirements.
As part of the IT and telecommunication setup in the country, which is doing very well, some people say that the bubble is going to burst any day now. How do you see the market of Pakistan in terms of the IT and telecom at this point, and do you think the future is as bright?
Yeah, so the telecom sector is very different from the IT sector. It's a very distinct difference. You can clearly say the telecom sector will grow purely on the basis of an existing demand, and the demand comes from the large number of people in the country. So till you sort of provide those services to that large consumer demand, you certainly have an area to grow. On the IT sector, there are some impediments. So there's certainly certain things that if we don't get our act together, we're certainly going to have to face and deal with, and that can impact our business. And that's a pretty long conversation in those areas. But yes, there are certain things that we have to sort of be cautious on, which is why, as I mentioned earlier, we're looking at alternative countries to build out capacity as well. But sort of the geopolitical issues, the inability for us to really build those relationships internationally, get our workforce out of the country on 1, 2, 3 month stints to work with partners in Europe, and those relationships, our inability to build those relationships are the ones that have given me the greatest grief.
As one of the younger professionals working out of Pakistan and trying to do something with the country in that way, what would you like to say to the younger students that are coming into the IT setup or trying to be one of the IT professionals in the country?
Right, so I'm going to give you a very tactical answer because there's so many things I could tell them. One thing I would tell them is really invest in their trade. I've seen far too many students who, throughout the course of their education, primary, secondary, they've focused in on the sciences, and from a bachelor's perspective, they've done their undergraduate also in sciences, and then all of a sudden they've basically turned around and said, you know what, I'm going to go for an MBA. And so that's very disappointing for me as a technologist as well. I'd like people to take ownership in their trade. If they are fundamentally attuned to mathematical sciences, then focus in on it. There's enough to be made if financial remuneration is their number one driving factor. There's enough to be made in this sector, whether it's there or abroad as well. People should not just right at the later point in their careers just walk away from something that they've invested 13, 14, 15 years towards. And that's one thing I would tell the young folks here is invest in your trade, take ownership of it, and sort of make it happen.
Well, now I'll come to the sort of the informal question. We had a lot of formal questions. You look like a workaholic, and I know you are. I've known you for years now. What do you do except when you're working? What is the?
Wow, this is a very tough question, and I've been thinking. And if I would probably be embellishing a little bit here if I were to come up with something. I find it very difficult to do anything but work, unfortunately, and that's the honest truth. I mean, I work on weekends as well. And nothing comes to mind, nothing structured comes to mind, and this is sort of my weakness. I need to figure out a way of channeling some elements of my energy in things other than work. But right now we're sort of in that phase as a business, from a growth perspective, that it just takes way too much of my time for me to do anything or invest some of my time in doing
Jamal, thank you very much. It was a pleasure. Had a great time talking to you. Well, viewers, I hope you guys had a great time. I did. Mr. Jamal Akbar Khan, the CEO of Arpatech. I think anybody who's now gone into their own companies trying to sort of start up a tech company or doing anything, I think Jamal's a great role model for all of you. So till next week, I'm signing off. This is Fawad Labasi from The Boss. Khuda Hafiz.